So while we can approach Revelations from a historical, historistic, and literary perspective, there eventually comes the question of simply, what does it say? And so we're going to walk through, given our lens in mythology and astrotheology, of the chronology of the book of Revelation. While, of course, I would push you as a listener to engage with this material yourself, here we can walk through the beats of the book, or books therein, and understand the codices, or the more subliminal, or the more historistic elements that are happening here. How does this symbolism speak through the lens that we've grown throughout the course? So we begin then with the opening vision. John of Patmos sees a vision of the risen Christ in glory, and among which there are 7 golden lampstands. This symbolizes the different churches. However, the 7 golden lampstands is of course also evocative of the menorah, the 7 churches of Asia Minor. This reoccurring use of 7 is something that we can deconstruct a number of different ways. However, we should point out very plainly the historical precedent for the 7 heavens. The 7 heavens are 7 heavens because there are, interpretably, by this ancient modality, 7 planets, and each of those planets gives way to an even greater aspect of the heaven. So each planet then is a kind of boundary to the next level of heaven ensuing. 7 planets, 7 heavens, 7 churches. The sacredness of the number 7 could be thought of as simply the observation of what the heavens shows us. The heavens shows us 7 wanderers, 7 planets, or historically 7 deities, that of which are the planets, they're one and the same, and what they represent, so forth. Moving forward quickly. Then there is this vision of the heavenly throne. John is, quote, caught up into heaven. So a direct vision of what is happening in space. God on the throne, surrounded by angels and elders, a scroll with 7 seals that nobody can open until the Lamb takes it. So we know that this Lamb is Christ, or a form of Christ, slain yet alive, thus also pushing that resurrection motif, both dead and living. This is intriguing of itself, but the 7 seals will become a big part of our deconstruction later. These 7 seals, what they mean exactly, how they ought to unlock, and what it would mean for our own internal realizations as well, not just simply something that's taking part in the heavens. So this Lamb, quote, "And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne stood a lamb as it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into all the earth." So if the Lamb is a kind of resurrection, it is Aries season, when the earth is done being in winter, when the earth is done being defeated by darkness, and the sun rises and brings about the abundance and the fertility of the land. Thus the Lamb, or the sacrifice of the Lamb at Passover to celebrate this time of the year, the earth's resurgence, this growth that becomes once more is a triumph over darkness. And so the Lamb, being Aries, is fertility. And of course, Jesus is associated with the Lamb here in many different forms throughout the Bible, but most notably, Jesus reproduced the bread. He reproduced the bread miraculously. And so, what else does that? Well, when the right season comes, bread is produced. Once again, it multiplies. Food multiplies. The association between Jesus and fertility deity is the associations as they're also had with Aries season, and thus why the form of the lamb here in Revelations. The lamb must open the seals. We'll deal with this more later. So, why Aries? This fire of renewal, as it's associated with the spring equinox, when the sun is reborn. Again, it was slain in December. The sun stopped in its rising and lowering patterns, and it held in the sky during the solstice. Sol, sun, stis, standing still. December 22nd, December 23rd, and December 24th, the 3 days that the sun is limp in the sky. So now that the sun has resurrected, the sun is reborn, and it now takes the podium of the earth. It's no longer winter. Now it's in the place in the sky where it can rule over the earth. The sun is reborn in Aries, and that's why the astrological year begins with Aries. So it's the new beginning. There's a sacrifice, a new beginning, and the fires of renewal. Aries is a cardinal fire sign. It is the hottest of all the fire signs in the sense that it has the most animacy and will to push forward, thus the warrior nature that comes along with Aries as well. Mars, after all, Aries, these are one and the same, Greek and Roman. It's the god of war, and it's pushing righteousness upon the earth. It's bringing back that which was suppressed. That's Aries, and thus also the Passover lamb, to the ancient practice of sacrificing the lamb during that season in solidarity with the abundance and the fertility that is to come. We have very little food left, and we do have a lamb. And while we could eat that, instead we give it over in solidarity to the gods or divinity. The ancient practices as such. So early Christians saw Jesus' death and resurrection at Passover as the direct fulfillment of this cycle. The sun cycle, the solar cycle. The lamb is Aries and Jesus is one and the same. The spring sun slain in winter, given over to darkness, but rises victorious in the equinox. 7 horns and 7 eyes here. Horns are an ancient emblem for strength, thus the bull. Eyes are illumination, sight. That's why the many wheels with many eyes is, that's why that symbol looks that way. The cherubim look that way. Or no, more specifically, the orphanim look that way. The many wheels with many eyes. This is, again, illumination, consciousness, awareness. So 7 isn't literal here. Again, 7 is just the reoccurring sacred number. So when it uses the number 7, it's just simply saying sacred. It's adding sacred in its own way. Again, 7 planets or 7 chakras. Aries lamb being 7 eyes and 7 horns, this is a kind of emboldenment of what Aries archetypally brings. Aries is already renewal, righteousness, and a warrior disposition. But then you are giving it 7-fold energy, you see. It has the horns and it has the eyes. It has the strength and the illumination even greater than it ever has been. So you see how the symbolism supercharges it once you understand how to interpret the symbolism. The lamb is slain but victorious, and this we could divulge in a more spiritual way as well. What could we say about the dark night of the soul? What could we say about entering a particularly difficult era in your life, tragedies and so forth, and somehow through all that you come out the other side better? You've divulged your demons, you've put them down, you've transcended these issues, and now you come back stronger. You have more strength, horns, you have more insight, eyes. And so unlocking these seals, we could see this potentially as the zodiacal wheel, unlocking the planets of the solar system month by month, because then again, once we begin Aries season, we have roughly 7 months to move through before the darkness comes once more. Those 7 months will be months of abundance, or months where we can have agriculture, where the land will prosper. And once that's done, we'll repeat this cycle all over again. So perhaps the seals here are representing just that, the ensuing months after Aries. The beast and the dragon will come up quite a bit, and here we can right away point out this association with winter constellations, or the forces of darkness that come during the year, during the winter, to put down the sun, and the darkness takes over the earth, right? It gets cold, it gets darker. These things get a podium. The woman clothed with sun, that we'll get even later then, is Virgo. That's the main interpretation. It's the constellation Virgo, of which the sun is viewed to be birthed out of during that time of the year. So the woman clothed with sun here will be a later reference towards a plain constellatory alignment of where the sun is born during that time of the year in that part of the sky. If we knew our astronomy better, then we would see that this is literally true. And so to give one last kind of point for later, we could also, in this vein, interpret the New Jerusalem, as it will come up, as an eternal spring, where there will be winter and death no more. So Aries here is an initiator. Out of that, Aries is a warrior that pushes out of that. The lamb conquers by its own sacrifice. It doesn't conquer necessarily in the beginning through violence. It conquers through its own sacrifice. There's some real spiritual stuff there if you want to divulge and mull around with that. And so the lamb's wrath in Revelation 6:16 is as though it's Aries' fire. This fierce purification, and that's the other end to this. The ancient Zoroastrian icon of the fire, the sacred fire, as that carried through into Judaism and into Abrahamic traditions. Fire is purification. Fire is that of which the deities appear within. When the angels or gods show up, there are fires. And this is allegorical in one sense, but if you're looking at the heavens and you're projecting these great divinities coming down from heaven, then lightning would certainly be something you'd pay attention to. Thus why Thor bears lightning, why Zeus bared lightning, why Jupiter bared lightning. These ruling deities being able to wield that which causes fire. So again, it's worthy of reiteration. The Aries sun that is born this year will fall. It will be slain. Agriculture will end. The winter will come. So thus, the lamb is sacrificed. But it will be alive once more. The sun is reborn in December and returns in its power in Aries season. So it is, quote, slain but alive. So let's start divulging these 7 seals, because that's what comes next in our narrative here. The Lamb opens each seal, and all these negative attributes come from each seal. So the first 4 seals bring the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: conquest, war, famine, and death. The 5th seal brings the martyrs that cry out for justice. The 6th seal brings out a cosmic upheaval. This is all manner of natural disasters, earthquakes, a darkened sun, which is an eclipse, and falling stars, which are meteors, right? The 7th seal, thus, is silence in heaven, leading to the trumpet judgments. So let's deconstruct these seals in some unconventional ways. And I want to use the chakras here just as a curiosity. Let's just go with this for the sake of intellectual intrigue. Does this work? Do the 7 seals correlate with the 7 chakras? After all, when it comes to the literary reference of chakras, where we can say their furthest back dating could go, because we don't know when this kind of way of thinking was invented, so to speak, or discovered, but nonetheless, it goes back as far, potentially, as 1500 BC, so very far before the writer of Revelation. So it would have been, at the very least, in the same world, if not an available knowledge set to this writer. India's influence in other religious traditions, Hinduism's influence, is unnegotiable when it comes to studies in comparative mythology. So again, let's go forth with the possibility. So the first seal is the white horse, quote, Revelation 6:2, and I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow and a crown that was given unto him. This bow and crown, white horse iconography very much does seem to hint towards an ancient depiction of Vishnu, but we're not going to go into that. This isn't our grounds right now. This could potentially be the root chakra, foundational survival strength. The white horse thus is purity, this raw life force that comes up from the earth that gives animacy. So, is this a thing? The second seal, Revelation 6:4, and there went out another horse that was red to take place from the earth. While the red is more evoking of that root chakra's typical color, we could instead look at this potentially as the sacral chakra, passion, sexuality, conflict that comes from that. It's always the goddess of love and war, right? The sacral chakra. This releasing or unleashing of raw desire and passions. The third seal is the black horse. Revelation 6:5, and lo, a black horse that he sat on him had a pair of balances. This is interesting, the balances. We could think about Virgo, for instance, but if we're traditionally looking at the solar plexus, then the color's wrong. But the idea of the balances makes a lot of sense. This is the center of the character, the center of the chakras, so to speak. The solar plexus is the solar, meaning the sun within, the fire of the liver, and thus why Prometheus's torment was that his liver was eaten, because he stole the fire of the gods, the intuition, the divinity, and gave it to man. That fire of the gods is in your liver. That's the traditional ancient understanding. That's why you call it your solar plexus. If we are a mirror of the solar system, then at the center of us is the sun. So in this case, power, the will, the balance of resources, scales weighing justice, hunger, scarcity, control, survival, all these things are balanced within the plexus and is the seat of the intuition. Now, if this is a black horse, this might also be that negative attribution where the sun is eclipsed. Reoccurringly throughout Revelations, the black sun is referenced. It only appears so during an eclipse. And we are talking about supernatural occurrences here, after all, aren't we? Again, just entertaining. The fourth seal is the pale horse, which is death. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death. This could potentially be the heart, the pale horse being the heart, morality, compassion. This confrontation with death opens the heart's center to compassion, transformation. So right away, if we're entertaining this, actually, then we might be entertaining this as an inner initiation of divulging or unleashing the negative potentials or the opposite potentials, the storages, the negative storage of each of these chakras. We're pushing through the suffering that's held into each of these energic centers, and after that, transcending. The fifth seal evokes the martyrs under the altar. Revelation 6:9, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God. This seems to be a little bit more seamless with this deconstruction because we're at the point of the throat chakra, voice, truth, testimony. The martyrs cry out their voices from under the altar, which is potentially evoking the third eye, the podium of the soul, the altar being the temple, or in the temple, literally the temple of the mind, from under the altar, aligning the expression truth, even given the persecution. So this also unlocks that negative trauma, so to speak. The martyrs that were silenced, their voice left unheard or suppressed or executed. Once more, we're contrasting what is normal to the function of that energic center, the throat, to speak, to give out the truth. But in this kind of initiation of the seals, we're bringing up the negative traumas associated with them. Thus, the colorations tend to be wrong as they are with the chakras. That's to say that the body of mankind, or your body, is ill fit with its own chakric centers. Moving on, the sixth seal is more of a cosmic upheaval. Revelation 6:12 through 13. And I beheld a great earthquake, and the sun became black, and the stars of heaven fell onto the earth. When we've encountered this kind of language in the Bible before, it's this kind of dramatization of something that's happening on a more emotive level. There's countless examples to bring up, so we won't necessarily take that for granted. But anyway, if the sun becomes black, that's an eclipse, a very rare event. But also to block out the radiance of the sun. If the sun is the third eye in this instance, the pituitary gland, what have you, it is the source of consciousness, of perception, of vision, of awakening. Frequently throughout Hinduism and in the New Age, it's associated with enlightenment. So if we're playing that negative role in this of the seals, then for the sun to become black means that it's obfuscated or it's obscured. So these cosmic visions are no longer available, or the cosmic visions that are given are those of apocalyptic unveiling. to have to divulge the dark night of the soul, you see. We have to go down to find the foundations, and only after we've divulged those foundations, had a copious existential detriment and despair, only then could we find the pillars to go up from there. The seventh seal, silence in heaven, Revelation 8:1. And when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about space of half an hour. This is very odd. We are going to do some numerology later, but a half an hour is very obscure. That's not a frequent metric of time in the Bible. And so that one will remain a mystery, why exactly that span of time. But the crown, as we know, or as many of us know, in the chakric tradition, is transcendent. It's the Godhead. It's that of which supersedes or connects us with the ether or the akasha, or that of which is the totality of all things. This silence, then, would be a lack of response. If we receive our intuitive yeses and nos, or if we receive what we ought to do in this world from an external source, the logos, as the ancients called it, and if we call out to that source, but it does not reply, it is silent, then that is an abandonment. That is an alienation, a lack of connection with which we were sprung from, and a lack of connection of which we're in the midst of. This is the opposite of spiritual union, then. That's one interpretation. So, as a broad look at this potential way of deconstructing the seals, this is a progression from the root chakra to the crown. This is from survival into transcendent union. And divulging these would also be to divulge the negative traumas and the negative entropy, the negative karma that has been amassed across time. The senseless wars, the robbery, the disenfranchisement, the dehumanization, all of these things need to be worked out. Humanity's history is a history of pushing the ball further down the road, of divulging what hurt we have experienced. Ancestral karma is real. The hurt from one generation carries unto the next, and endlessly we pass it on. So at this point then, whether in yourself or collectively, this would be very dark. If we need to work this out, all of which is buried, this is not a good time. These trials then, each seal is nodding to or describing to a certain degree the trials of which, again, the individual or the collective of humanity are going through in order to lead upward, so to speak. This unveiling is not just unveiling nice things, it's unveiling the collective baggage of our trauma. And the chakras opening sequentially in this way is evoking the Kundalini experience, of course. You can pick this whole deconstruction apart. You can say, this isn't quite consistent, this isn't quite consistent with that, but at the very least, it's evocative, it's provoking, it's certainly entertainable at the very least. But this isn't the only way that we can deconstruct the seals, or the number 7 for that matter. I mean, we have reoccurringly 7 for the seals. We have 7 trumpets, we have 7 bowls, we have 7 spirits, 7 churches, 7 candlesticks. Where will we apply this deconstruction, and where won't we apply this deconstruction? In Kabbalism, for instance, if we take out the supernal triangle at the top, then collectively there are 7 lower sephirot, these emotional manifesting spheres These also could be used to potentially deconstruct the seals or the trumpets or so forth, stages of purification and the stages of the emanations of the Godhead. So, nonetheless, we can see the parallel that these seals are a process of moving energy. We could say that this moving energy is throughout the world. We could say this moving energy is throughout the Sephiroth. We could say it's moving through the chakras. But before we do more of that work, I want to move off to the side here and talk about just a kind of a mainline numerology in the Abrahamic tradition. Now, we're going to stay pretty myopic here. We're going to stay focused because this could be in hours and hours and hours and hours of a session alone, Abrahamic numerology. So let's just begin modestly. One is unity, God, beginning. Oneness, creation. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, Deuteronomy 6:4, the source, the beginning of the emanation. 2, division, duality, and also a witness. This is especially true in the Kabbalistic tradition, that the number 2 is a witness, the image. So these are pairs, yin yang, dark light. You create 2, you thus create division. So 2 could be partnership or 2 could be opposites. That's a bit of a dualistic number. 3 is the Trinity, which all of a sudden acclaims this sacred status. This is viewed as perfection as a broad stance in the Abrahamic tradition, the body, the soul, and the spirit. In Christianity, this is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In Islam, there are the 3 holy cities. Kabbalistically speaking, and previously mentioned, there's the supernal triangle, the top 3 of the tetragrammaton. These are the trinity of the Most High. This is a reoccurring sacerdotal number. But it still lives in the kind of spiritual plane most often. It's nodding to things that are beyond, thus supernal. Whereas when we get to 4, the created world, the 4 directions, the 4 elements, Revelation 7:1, 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, this is stability. This is the structure of the world. You could argue that this is matter, the physical composition of the universe, and thus on the 4th day, so forth, so forth. 5 is when things start to get a little bit more interesting because it's interwoven. Do you think the pentagram is implicative because of its penta, its 5 aspects? But there are the 5 senses. There are the 5 books of the Torah. In Islam, there's the 5 daily prayers, the 5 pillars. This overall, as a broad statement, is human responsibility. The functions now that the world is created by 4 is one of upkeeping or being entangled with. 5 then is a kind of covenant. 6 is the bad number. This is imperfection, and this also can represent humanity at large. This is the work. The work is what we're doing on this planet. This is very Zoroastrian. We need to put in X amount of work in order to bring about the perfect utopia or the eschaton, the final days. Except in Zoroastrianism, this most assuredly led to a collective utopia, whereas that gets tainted a bit depending on what Abrahamic tradition you're looking at, because the apocalypse is not universally viewed in the same way. If mankind was created on the 6th day, and the broad understanding of the number 6 is an incompletion, then that means that mankind was brought in a incomplete way. This is the kind of the undercurrent of the Bible in a very distinctive sense, or the story of Genesis, we should say that when mankind was brought in, the world was not complete, or when mankind was brought in, he was not complete. And there are several other stories outside of the Abrahamic tradition. If we entertain the Gnostic, then this takes on all manner of different interpretation. But it is to say that 6 is the number of mankind then. And when the beast is given the number 666, we have to pay attention to a certain trope of how the Bible deals with numbers. It does certain numbers over, or it multiplies them when it wants to enunciate the power of that kind of claim that the number is bringing forward. So if 6 means incompletion, and the number of the beast is 666, then that would mean that the incompletion has exponentiated onto itself. And we can think of this as being spiritually devoid, that of which is lacking the consciousness, that of which is lacking the human spark, so to speak, or the soul. The incompletion has entropied so deep into this one, or into humanity at this point, that it no longer knows where it is, what it's doing, or what it's on about. The whole mission of mankind has been lost and is now consuming itself. You see, thus, the mark of the beast that harms all things and itself, presumptively. 6's negative association is simply because it's not quite 7, and that tells you enough about what 7 is supposed to be. 7 is the divine perfection. It is fulfillment. So if mankind was brought in at 6, then that would imply that it has to move towards 7, which is, again, perfection, fulfillment. And the number 7 in its historical, mythic, and historistic significance is, of course, again, worthy of mentioning, the 7 planets in the sky. If we're looking out and we're trying to understand what we're doing here, what the gods, or God, up there are trying to show us, if there are 7 astral bodies up there, then that must mean he who put those things up there must be showing us that 7 is quite a big deal. There are 7 days of creation accordingly, Sabbath on the seventh day, thus Sunday, thus why it's the special day for reverence. In Revelation, again, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 churches, 7 spirits. This symbolizes the cosmic order, the cycles of completion. 7 then is not simply sacred to the Abrahamic tradition. 7 extends well outward, and you could argue that it ultimately came from India, the sacredness of this number. But we are continuing a good trend when we get to 8 as well. This is renewal and resurrection. So this is playing a cycles kind of philosophy. If we're moving through the cycles of numbers, then we're not done after perfection. We're not done after fulfillment. We get to 8, which is renewal, resurrection. This is new beginning. Jesus is resurrected on the 8th day. This is because he's resurrected on the first day of the week, and thus it's the 8th day because it's the day after the 7th day of the week, which is Sunday. Again, to reiterate, 8 is this new beginning, this renewal. We're going to start moving more quickly now. 9 symbolizes judgment and truth. 10 is totality, thus why there were 10 plagues in Egypt. This is a symbol of completion, thus also the 10 commandments. Fullness of the law. We skip to 12. It's cosmic order. These are the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 apostles, the 12 gates, the 12 foundations. This is the zodiac. This is unquestioning. If 10 is the totality or the fulfillment of the cycle of man, 12 is the cosmic order's completion number. This is God's completion, so to speak, outside of the realm of man, which you could say 10 is our number of completion simply by how many fingers we have on our hands. 40 plays a reoccurring sacred number. This is a testing. 40 tends to represent a testing or a transformation of some kind. The tribe of Israel wandering through the desert for 40 years, Jesus fasting for 40 days. These each, in their instances, the number 40 in the Bible, representing, again, testing and transformation. This endurance of some sort to achieve a greater state of being or to get to the other side of a long transition. So this is our means of approach. I'm just giving a kind of rudimentary codices, so to speak, to better understand and give us the tools necessary to approach, quote, Christian numerology. This draws heavily from Judaic numerology, of course, but it focuses here on a more Christ-centered fulfillment, so to speak. The example of 888 being equal in gematria to Jesus or Jesus, 888 in gematria. That's how you break down the number. And if you break down the number 666, then you can get to a derivation of the name Nero Caesar, and that's the historical interpretation. The writers of the Bible making it obscure what they're actually saying. And again, to emphasize once more, in this era, this book was interpreted as though it was speaking about this era, the changing of the New Age into Pisces, the ruling kingdoms, the Babylon of it all, and the eventual fall of that Babylon. So if each Hebrew letter is a number, in this case, that adds this additional complexity. The word Messiah, the word serpent, both of these equal the number 358. The connection thus between the Messiah and the serpent is a bit uncanny then if we're looking at it from this level of deconstruction. When we're bringing in Islamic numerology, this goes even further in several respects and earns its own tropes. For instance, the 99 names of Allah. The Quran often references symbolic numbers in the same way. 7 heavens, 40 days. This is still following in that Abrahamic tradition. But to focus on the numerology in Revelation, which is what we're doing here after all, 7 dominates throughout. Again, the seals, the trumpets, the bowls. You have 12 appear in the heavenly city. That is obviously zodiacal. When you have the number 144,000, and that's been a number that's taken towards all manner of controversy, the 144,000 people that will be saved. If you break down this number, instead of taking it literally, it's 12 times 12 times 1,000. So if we're amplifying the significance or the meaning that comes with each number, 12 again is the cosmic completion. Cosmic completion times cosmic completion, extra cosmic completion, times 1,000, which if 10 is mankind's completion, you times that by 10 and you times that by 10, that's an extra triplicate form of completion for mankind. So then this number is the kind of summative nature of the completion of both the cosmos and the completion of mankind. And thus the number 666 would appear in these same books, right? Because it's showing that imperfection, that of which has not yet reached the 7. This battle between that of which is incomplete and that movement that we're all moving towards, which is completion. That's the philosophy at the base of this. So we should also entertain Kabbalism with regards to this numerology. If 10 is completion, then it mirrors that 10 Sephirot as well. And Revelation echoes this with the 10 horns of the powers of the empire, the beast with 10 horns. These 10 horns is a counter to that, you see. The 10 of completion is the 10 of the completion of the empire. It's reached its final form, so to speak, as far as mankind would ever allow it to go. But it's not 12. It's not 12 horns. That would mean that it's a cosmic creation and not a creation of mankind. Interesting, right? Now we can really start to dig in. So if there are 12 tribes, if there are 12 apostles, if there are 12 permeations of the divine name of Yahweh, so to speak, then these are things that exist in that metaphysical beyondness, in the cosmic order of things. And so the 12 tribes and the 12 apostles then are not plainly men. They are evoking the zodiacal or the cosmic order. And if we use this as a means of understanding, then Kabbalism, by virtue of not having 12 but only having 10 Sephirot, means that it's particularly pointed at the nature of mankind. Looking at it through this lens, then the whole of Revelations is a battle between that of which is trying to unveil the completion of mankind, and that is pitted against this evil or this demonic force or this abyss. The distortion of this enlightenment is feuding to maintain the world as it is. And so this is interesting in the sense that the orders that are opposing this are attempting to keep the status quo in the way that it is. That's one way of looking. And so Satan here, or the dragon, or the evil forces unleashed, is not just an inversion of the divine order, but is also the collection of trauma that is not open to allowing newness to come in. This repression comes from the underbelly of our subconscious, so to speak. The destruction of this trauma, the destruction of this distortion, is the destruction of confusion, of the darkness, you see, of getting the actual idea and actual picture of what's going on here. It's no longer obscure. And so the dragon, or the beast, then, is a lower order. We might even think of it as our brainstem, our survival instincts, these things of which will keep this world in a egoic frenzy and will maintain an ever greater empire. The seals, the bowls, and the trumpets are extensions or purifications, successive purifications of the lower Sephirot. The lamb on the throne, then, if we're being a bit sideways about this, would be Tiferet. It would be the divine harmony and beauty, that of which is at the center of the tree. New Jerusalem, then, would be either a new Malkuth, a new kingdom, or that finally Keter is aligned with the kingdom, the Malkuth at the bottom, and the heaven and earth are joined as one. And so when the line says in Revelations, there will be no more death, we might just tease at that Ein Sof, that infinite, that of which is beyond Keter, that of which Keter stems from. Infinite is a surefire way to get around the subject of death. If mankind were to realize perhaps the mystic nature of the universe, the true mystic nature, a collective understanding of this true mystic nature, then perhaps that would mean no more death in a figurative sense. And we would join that Ein Sof once more. So let's continue with our narrative in the sense that let's get back to the book. Let's look at the 7 trumpets. Each trumpet unleashes another catastrophe: hail, fire, poisoned waters, darkness, locust, plagues. We don't necessarily need an apocalypse for these things to happen. And the timeline of which these things are happening is also interesting. And the 6th trumpet brings a massive cavalry, an army that brings death. How many times has that happened? Or are we to expect that a massive cavalry will once again come about? And lastly, the 7th trumpet. heavenly voices proclaim that God's kingdom is coming. That's the ominous note. And with the last trumpet, it's arriving, or the promise of that of which is arriving. So the 7 trumpets then are an unleashing once more. And if we go back to our chakras as a means of deconstructing, if we open these up and the chakras are activated, if the seals open the chakras, then the trumpets activate them. The seals break open these hidden energies. They sound forth. This is radiance. This is resonance. This is vibration. This is a plunging from deep below through an unwelcoming vessel. The spiral progressions of the trumpets. Is this planetary? Is this, for instance, the first trumpet, hailfire, is this Mars? Is the second trumpet Jupiter with its mountain cast into the sea? Is wormwood, the wormwood star falling? Is that supposed to be Mercury? Is the fourth trumpet supposed to be the moon when the stars are darkened? Is that done by the moon? The fifth trumpet being Venus inverted. Pleasure would otherwise turn to torment, locusts. The abyss opens. The sixth as Saturn, limitation, destruction, death. And lastly, the seventh being this big lead that we need to go down later, which is a nod to Uranus, or the heavens, the kingdom revealed through Uranus, that we're going to pause on for now. But it's just to say that, are these trumpets like cosmic resonance, for instance? Is this the music of the spheres? Is this frequency? Why is the tie with frequency? Trumpets seem very on the nose in that regard. Is that frequency in us? Is that chakral? Or is that frequency planetary? Or is it both? Where do these sound out from? When the heavens are brought up in the Bible, are they not evoking the 7 heavens, that of which are distinguished by the planets? If each shift in this vibration brings closer and closer this final transformation, then this sounds like an initiation, or yet again, an unlocking process. Let's put it this way. If everything that we've done has been built up in confusion and in folly, that we don't know what's going on here, we don't know what reality is, we don't know why we're alive, we don't know what exactly this is all on about, we would have no choice but to build up things in folly, in a foolishness, because we don't know the truth. If these things are unlocking, then it would be destructive, because we've built so much in the absence of the unknown. We've done all that we can, but to bring truth or to bring revelation would mean destruction of what has been made. And I don't think that's necessarily cynical. I don't think that's vengeful. I think that's just plainly a matter of process. So including these literary elements, these trumpets, these seals, it seems to be quite purposeful. And if it's quite purposeful, then we should ask ourselves what exactly it's doing and how it came to that literary device. How does one come to the idea of the seals? How does one come to the idea of the trumpets unless they're supposed to evoke something ancillary or equivocable to them? Nonetheless, this is not something that's simply inner or outer or both, right? Where do we orient ourselves towards this? I mean, most certainly when it comes to this whole text, we know it's cosmic. When it says that a woman clothed with sun shows up, we know that that's Virgo. When we see the great dragon, or Satan, and it wishes to devour the child but fails and is cast down to the earth, We know that that's Draco at the feet of Virgo, and that is where the sun is born at that appropriate time of the year. This is also mirrored by King Herod and his story in the earlier part of the Bible, how King Herod wanted to destroy all the children in anticipation. This is also Saturn. Saturn wished to consume all of his children so that one would not come to dethrone him. The dragon is doing the same thing mythically as King Herod and as Saturn did. This is astrotheological. This is mythical. This is interpretable in the stars. And when beasts rise from the sea, we can interpret this as the empires on one hand, but we could also interpret this as the celestial sea, that of Pisces, that of Cetus, this cosmic ocean as it is historically and astrologically a part of the sky. You can go out and observe this part of the sky and know that the ancients referred to this as the waters because of all the water-bearing signs associated with these constellations. Moving on, for now, the 7 bowls come next, and of course there are 3 cycles here: the seals, the trumpets, and then the bowls. And if these energic centers, planetary or otherwise, have been activated, then there will be a purging. And the 7 angels pour out the bowls of wrath, sores, poison seas, scorching heat, the plagues across the earth, the seas of blood, the poisoned rivers, the darkness. This then is a direct expression of the despair that comes about from letting out that of which you would never let out. This is airing out the room, certainly. So we open, we activate, and then we purge. If these energic centers, wherever they are resonating as they should, then it needs to clear out, burning away impurities. This is not pleasant in the personal experience of it, but this is a cleansing. Humanity's corrupted energies. The first bowl are sores. Is this the root chakra? Corrupted, survival, suffering of the body. The second and third, seas and rivers of blood. Is this the sacral? Have the waters of life been poisoned? Is the fourth bowl the sun, thus the solar plexus, the fire of will? Is the fifth bowl the heart, once again subverted, the darkness, the eclipse, the testing of compassion? Is the sixth bowl the throat, and thus the voice, and the command has been misused? And is the seventh bowl lightning, earthquake, thus the third eye, that of which collapses the structures? This is all pretty sketch, in my opinion. It's all pretty sideways leaning to make it work. But the overall note of a karmic cleaning or cleansing is certainly apropos, I feel. Perhaps things have been inspired in this respect, but they aren't taking it directly from the page, so to speak. It's more of a kind of analogous allegory. So taking a heavy hand from the chakra tradition or taking a heavy hand from the planetary tradition, I think bears fruit, but one should not be OCD about trying to make it all fit together. I think one could certainly make the argument that the astrological forces of the planets are involved in this purging, because the heavens would all need to align in a certain way to instigate these happenings. When we're talking about things are happening up in the heavens, we simply can't deny that the ancients paid attention to the constellations and the planets and all the stories they're in. They knew this. This was unquestionable. And so, although we don't want to be super meticulous, because in that we'll only find frenzy, nonetheless, we can't deny that these things are perhaps planetary, energic, inward. The bowls are like libations, poured out. In alchemy, to pour out is a dissolution, the dissolving of impurities. If you wish to make gold out of yourself, as the alchemists did, as they wanted to achieve that prima materia, then we have to dissolve the impurities. We have to become that original substance. And so then Revelation's bowls could fit as a kind of alchemical allegory as well, although alchemy comes much later, but a recipe. This final purge of the Piscean corruption before the Aquarian renewal, maybe. Or, if it was back in that era, the final purge of the Aries corruption before the Piscean renewal. So, to reiterate the progression here, we have three different movements, and of course we have three different movements. It's the Trinity, the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls. And it's the three stages of transformation. It's initiation, activation, and purification. These are foundational parts of the religious and initiatory experience. If one puts in the earnest work to clear out oneself, clear out your shadow, clear out the traumas that have been withdrawn into your body, then what would be left of you after these things are gone? How wrecked would you be? If the planets or the times or the universe put on a very specific hour, as though it was conspiring against you to make all the circumstances perfect in order to bring this about, what would this final alchemized dissolution leave you with other than a complete rebirth or renewal? The Kundalini, for instance, is an aspiration of this kind of movement. The Kundalini is the coiled one, again, playing with the snake vibes here, and to move that energy from the base of the spine all the way until its completion at the top. To put through all this work of spiritual practice, yoga, meditation, breath work, and devotion towards what? Towards what exactly? These very same steps: initiation, activation, and purification. The serpent has always played a particularly strong symbolic role in Western religion. The serpent sheds its skin. Thus, it is a symbol of transformation and rebirth. Admirable. And actively making itself an allegory in this regard. And so if we're using the snake in this instance to solicit the idea of energy and transformation and rebirth, this is very appropriate. And so slaying the serpent here in Revelations is a kind of interesting nod in that direction. I don't think it's a contradiction. I think it's very appropriate. Because what happens? It sheds. After all, what are the sadhus seeking? What are these practitioners seeking other than an experience of the truth or pure consciousness or moksha, liberation? Liberation from what? The horrors of this world. And that's what Revelations is attempting. In a collective way, in a internal way, in a external way. it's a process that mirrors this process. After all, the snake moves in 3 directions. It moves left, it moves right, and it moves center. Left is the lunar, the feminine, the intuitive. Right is the masculine, the solar, and the rational. And the center is the balance, that of which is the spiritual ascent. And of course, that's a 3, as it mirrors the 3 processes that we've been elucidating here. And of course, it's worthy of pointing out that the Bible has played with this iconography. When Moses puts up his staff to create Nehushtan, to heal them, it takes the shape of what? This caduceus. So there's some deep-knit stuff here. It's in the mix. That's all I'm saying, is it's in the mix. All of this is pushing one towards a proper awakening, not some posturing, not some maybe energy. No, this is a plunge. And in this instance of this book, it seems inconsensual in that it's a force. The force is coming. Or should we understand this as an illustration of something that is lost? It very much seems affixed in the external world. This is true. But ancient myth and ancient allegory are always subversive in that regard. Is it a moral story? Is it a literal story? And of course, historically, it's been taken literally. And people are expecting these bowls to be poured from heaven. They're expecting these seas of blood to manifest. So, this awakening, whether it's done via Kundalini, revelation, whatever, is powerful, is dangerous, is an expelling of a certain part of your identity, a certain part of your world. So let's kind of review a little. If the Bible uses this reoccurring image of the serpent, and it's not always the devil, when Moses' staff just simply turns into a serpent, and that's not the devil, then that means that there's some confusion with regards to what the serpent is meaning. For Moses, it means something else. In the garden, it means something else. And in Revelation, it means something else. This is up for interpretation. The alchemizing of this is also very interesting. This transmutation of your energy, of your personhood, of a process of becoming. Is Job not an illustration of a process of becoming? Astrotheologically, too, we see that's obviously in the mix. The cosmic powers, the constellations are referenced. And so it calls itself revelation. This is the sought goal of the text. Transformation. Reverence. Chapters 17 to 19 in Revelations cover the fall of Babylon. And in this case, we should be very reflective in the sense that this is literally Babylon, and it's also the empires that were inspired from Babylon. The various beasts as they appear in Daniel, they tell you outright in Daniel when these beasts appear that these are empires. And so now when we're in Revelations and we're seeing that Babylon the Great, a descendant of the harlot city, the corrupt empire, Rome, is judged and destroyed. Heaven rejoices. There is the rider on the white horse, which is Christ in this particular book, and the heavenly armies are ready against the beast. There's plenty to dig into here. A avatar of Vishnu, Kalki, was a rider of the white horse in Hinduism and was raised to do so against unrighteousness. I couldn't find the tie in Zoroastrianism with this direct symbol, the rider on the white horse, but know that this appearance in Revelation is mythically rooted. And I could go so far as to wonder if this is the summer cross, for instance, astrotheologically speaking, but I haven't found anything very substantial in that regard. But it's a possibility. Nonetheless, this act of raising heaven's armies against Babylon is a very obvious depletion of that presence from the world. This is what we all wish for, or is it? That's the question. For the inhabitants of the world that benefit from the power structures as they've been grown, this is horror. And for those that have been kind of in the right graces of Christianity, so to speak, the unconventional, the unorthodox, the countercultural, would this not then be a great instance in the world to retributively see the empires being taken down? So I think that should be minded. And then, of course, comes the final judgment. Satan is bound for 1,000 years. And this binding I find interesting because, again, if we're talking about Satan here, then he has two analogs in Christianity at large, but especially in Revelations. The constellation Draco, as mentioned, and the planet Saturn. The interesting thing about the constellation Draco is that its very tail, the star on its very tail, is Thuban. And Thuban was the North Star of the Earth, at least until 3000 BC. And so at 3000 BC, Draco is no longer at the podium of the Earth. And so when it swipes its tail and the stars fall, you see, this is Draco. It's making it very obvious. There's a dragon. It has something to do with stars. It has a notable tail, the Great Red Dragon, the constellation Draco. Now, Draco was dethroned from its podium in heaven, which is another way that you could potentially tie it with the whole Lucifer myth. He who was closest to God falling, or in Luke, I saw Satan fall from the sky. This would have been perhaps the North Star or the star Thuban as it was officially moving into Polaris. The Earth in this way is on a wobble. And now our North Star is Polaris, but it will return to Thuban in roughly 26,000 AD. So when it says that Satan is bound for 1,000 years, I'm of course inclined to believe that 1,000 is yet again a symbolic number, as is iconic to the Abrahamic traditions. It's not a literal number. 10 times 10 times 10. 1,000. Completion, completion, completion. So Satan is bound then, or the North Star Thuban is no longer in the North Star podium. It has been supplanted. But again, of course, it says it will return. But ultimately, once it returns, it is finally destroyed in a lake of fire. And this, to me in particular, is symbolic. Have you ever seen a volcano? If you look inside, do you see a lake of fire? If it's at the peak of the horizon, this mountain that bears a volcano, and we see the stars dip into it, then that's quite symbolic of its destruction. And especially coming from the ancient past, natural allegory would be the means to describe something. And so thus to see him cast into the lake of fire, or where these people are who are writing this, are they looking at what they know of as Mount Sinai? And is Mount Sinai lava bearing? These are open questions. That's what we're doing here. We're giving these open questions as we're diving through. So Satan, on one hand, is the old serpent, named as that dragon, that old serpent. Again, very obvious to the circumpolar constellation that is Thuban or Draco. This long astrological cycle that it's on. It's a part of the great age of mankind. And if you wanted to get more technical with it, there's the Golden Ages, there's the Bronze Ages, there's the Dark Ages, right? Humanity is on a coil, a cycle of seasons. In Hinduism, these are the Yuga cycles. We're on a cycle here. And so with these seasons, at times, we'll have Draco at the podium as part of one of these seasons. But I also said that there's Saturn in the mix here. And Saturn is the star that's furthest on the other side away from us than the sun is. Sun is this many planets away on this side. The Saturn's this many planets away on the other. It is viewed as a counter in the ancient world to the sun, the opposite. Saturn eats his children. That's the myth of Saturn. Saturn was anticipating the coming of Zeus, so he ate his children in order to keep his throne. He denied the coming era, you see. He didn't step out of the way, he denied it. And so he devoured his children. And what do we see? We see the serpent at the feet of the Virgin attempting to devour the child in Revelation. While this is constellatory, that's true. Again, it's Virgo, it's Draco, and it's the sun where it's born in the night sky of that era, of that time of the year. It's also mythical accordingly, because the mythic mirrors the astrotheological. So Saturn, Satan are mirroring each other, or the myth that is Saturn's myth, or Kronos' myth, is utilized by this Christian canon. It is reappropriated into this Christian canon. So then by proxy, Saturn is Satan. And there's many more arguments that come along with that. So this also, when referencing the devil being cast away for 1,000 years, it says that he's loosed for a season. If we instead wanted to look to Saturn for that instead of Draco, we could think of a Saturn return. And a Saturn return is historically and astrologically a very trying time for individuals. If you know your astrology, then in roughly 27 to 29 years, you will have a Saturn return. And these are particularly grading eras of your life. To each individual, if you believe in astrology or not, but if the ancients are paying attention to this, then they're paying attention to Saturn and what it does. And its return is a return to where it was when you were born. And thus the Saturn return. It's done its full 28-year cycle. That's another way of looking at this. And also, if we're banishing Draco and instead we're thinking about Saturn, then perhaps in another way, the kind of grounds of Revelation is saying that Saturn and its astrological influence will be casted out. That's an interesting tie in this, but we'll tend to the planets more a bit later. So the numerology here is key. Again, 1,000 years, 10 times 10 times 10. Completion, not a literal span of time. 10 is the divine order. 1,000 is a magnified divine order. A millennium is an age. This is not a matter of 1,000 years. This is an age. And when we're talking about an age, we're talking about an astrological age, which is, by my research and by a more universal metric, 2,150 years. So if that's the case, then this influence will be casted out for a whole age. And if that's what it's saying, and if that's true, then this former age of Pisces that we've been in and that we're still in by many measurements, is supposedly the age the devil would have been casted out in, right? Clearly, that's not been the case. Empires have only flourished during this age. And that's what gets people a little bit on about the new age, this age of Aquarius reference, coming up 2150 to 2160 approximately. And so in that then, if it's pointing to Aquarius, which we'll investigate later, then that age will be one where the devil is casted out, or Draco is casted out, or Saturn is casted out, or this archetypal influence that comes with these symbols in the heavens will be lessened or will be grounded in a way. So for these forces to be bound, the force of Saturn being bound, this is time. Time is chronos. The oppression of death is tied to Saturn. Saturn and chronos keeps our mind preoccupied with the past and the future, and not the now. The celestial serpent, that pole star, is made in the Western tradition as an evil one, and just plainly that, one who is willing to commit evil. Full stop. So that's just more of a cultural choice of what the dragon has come to represent specifically to the Persian and the Middle East in this era. It was not so for the Greeks, and it was not so for the Romans. And to look onward, in China, the dragon was a good luck symbol. That constellation was of good fortune. So anyway, when it comes time for the end of Revelation, which we're just skipping for now, we'll get back to it, death is destroyed. There is the triumph of this whole thing. Death is destroyed. And so if ultimately this draconic negative force comes back after an age, its destruction is the destruction of death itself. Now, instead of thinking of this in the literal way, if we are reaching the truth as a spiritual sadhu or somebody who's on a fistful of plant medicine would tell you, we are all one, and there is only the now. To achieve a noetic state of being is to achieve a state of eternity, the eternal now, as they say. And if this is the naked truth underneath the illusion of time, and we are all to realize that, then death would be extinguished. You see, it's much deeper than simply nobody ever dies ever again. But perhaps in this truth, it's also the truth of afterlife or precarnation. It's the truth of a full frontal realization of exactly what we're doing here. And so even though what we thought of as death still occurs, it is not death in the way that we conceive of it now. I'm just offering this out. To get back to the chapters, the new heaven and the new earth in chapters 21 to 22. So this is what's replacing the old. There has been so much destruction, and New Jerusalem descends from the sky, a radiant city. Now, this descending from the sky is this, again, the fact that it's coming from the sky obviously inspires the ancient alien enthusiasts. But when it comes to all that has been ordained by astrological and astronomical signs throughout Revelation, for the city or New Jerusalem to descend from it is perhaps a direct manifestation from signs in the heavens. In the ancient world, we would not build temples unless the stars aligned with them. We would not go about certain events unless the stars aligned. There was a hefty preoccupation with only doing things when the universe mirrored that doing. And in order to do that, we'd also have to understand the sky as the ancients did. And we'd have to observe it as the ancients did. So instead of this literal city that's being exported, descending down from the sky, what if instead this is a gleaming sign that New Jerusalem is, right? This manifestation of the dream of a utopic world. So when it says lines like, "He will wipe every tear from their eyes, death shall be no more," this is very clear in its emotive quality. And I think that's what's important. When you've been through all of this trauma, turmoil, you've dug through your guts in a deep, dark night of the soul, then finally comes the reverence. If one has ever participated in a shamanic ritual or a plant medicine guided ritual, it's often said that the level of suffering, body dysmorphia, whatever, the level of dread that you experience is equal to the level of relief and euphoria that comes after that plunge. You got to dip down to dip up. You got to know what's good by what's bad, you see. And so the dread, the horror of all of that will be relieved. Death shall be no more. So let's spend a little bit more time here. If this is for everybody, then the astrological circumstances and all the events of the world will lead individuals into a genuine awakening and a genuine enlightenment. And in that enlightenment, they will realize that evil is no more because everybody has realized what's going on here. And so thus there is eternal paradise. And the universe itself, this cosmic clock that we're in, turns in such a way that it allows all of this to transpire. Or you as an individual are given all of these events, or I should say, or you as an individual are given all of these events, of which lead you into this great realization by following this text or by participating in the events, depending on how you want to interpret it. And from there, you come to this realization. Now, can you retain this realization? Because the word eternal here is interesting. Because when you're in these moksha states, when you're in these nirvana states, when you're in these noetic states, you are very aware of the eternity of it all. But that doesn't mean you don't slip back into this world. And I suppose what the overall statement is that this world that you slip back into is no more, thus you can't slip back into it. Or is it just that you get that experience and thus you're aware of the eternity? Anyway, if Saturn is destroyed, or Satan or the dragon is destroyed, then time itself is destroyed. There is no Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. There is no 1 or 4 o'clock. There is no get to me at this time next week, such and such. Chronos, the obsession with time, is destroyed. And who would be most affected by that? It would be Western civilization. Western civilization has built up in folly in this regard. The natives would be most attuned to going with the flow of this, so to speak. Chronos, or time itself, would be destroyed. And if we don't know time, we don't know death. And if we were good about, if we were so good in the Garden of Eden, as they often idealize, then what we didn't know of was time, past, present, future. We just were in the now. And thus it was eternal, because that's where eternity is. And honestly, that's where reality is. Reality is only the now. The rest of it is fiction. And so the will then would be to return to, let's just say, what is otherwise interpreted as an animalistic or more simple state of being. And this simple state of being is eternity. Time no longer rules, thus death no longer rules. And when Satan is cast into the brimstone, is cast into the lake of fire, this is a purification. This fire as purification is seen with Ezekiel's vision when the heavenly host is on fire. Or in Enoch, in the book of Enoch, the heavenly host is always on fire. This goes all the way back to the Zoroastrians and beyond. The Zoroastrians, as fire represents purification, and thus why they hold it as sacred. So to purify that old serpent, to purify that Saturn, if there's no more death relating to this as well, this has all been purified, then there's no unconscious fear. There is a soul-bound trust in the universe, an earned trust in the universe. And so with that, there's no more anxiety, there's no more despair. There is support. There is the unnegotiable feeling that there is a foundational, metaphysical, spiritual support. And so we can find little hints of this in previous chapters. When Paul says, "O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory?" is this evoking this sensation. So to get back on point, Satan being bound is the shadow of the world being restrained. Satan being destroyed is transcending the shadow of the world. If the previously mentioned number of 144,000 is in the Abrahamic numerology, meaning perfected humanity, then by the end of this chapter in these books, this is the number of our state of being. This is the number of, or resonance of humanity. So in all of this, let's get to this overall arc. Revelation is visions, judgments, cosmic battles, a chaotic battle between the divine order, beneficence, and chaotic evil, which ultimately leads to a renewal. This warning and promise that evil will reign and fall, and God's kingdom, or the promised utopia, will prevail, and creation will be made anew. And this is why it's so enticing to Christians throughout so many variant eras to say that it's right around the corner, to look out at this world and all of the corruption that is very plain to see, and to have this wish fulfillment that it will all be dealt with by a deus ex machina. But what's most undersold or most undermentioned about this is its many mythic parallels, and how the tone of this overall work is mythical in nature, mythical and apocalyptic. And that word apocalyptic means the unveiling of the truth. And so what truth exactly are we unveiling? Is this unveiling truth, in fact, a kind of state of being that we could all achieve, or that many have achieved in a noetic ecstasis? That this is a hint of what will come for all of us in that way. But we're not going to fully give our deconstruction right now. We still have a whole nother wing to entertain here, and that's if this work is actually commenting on the age of Aquarius, or if this work is supposed to be placed in this age of Pisces as it was written on the cusp of.